Hello and welcome to LSAT Logic Applied. I'm your host, Andrew Leahy, an assistant teaching professor of law at Drexel Klein School of Law. This is a short format podcast where I take the tools from LSAT Logical Reasoning, assumptions, flaws, causation, strength and weaken, and apply them to real-world claims in the news, science, and public discourse. For those that don't know, the LSAT is the law school admission test, a standardized exam designed to assess logical reasoning, analytical thinking, and reading comprehension for law school applicants. It's a high-stakes test with a unique focus on how arguments work and how they fall apart. The LSAT is owned and administered by the Law School Admission Council, or LSAC. I don't claim any affiliation or ownership. I'm just here to teach the logic. You don't need to be studying for the LSAT to follow along. The point is to learn how to spot weak or incomplete reasoning in everyday life. The same kind of reasoning the LSAT trains you to attack under time pressure. Today's episode is about inconsistency and scope shift, two classic LSAT flaws, and how they show up in a dispute over presidential immunity and civil litigation. In a Delaware lawsuit brought against him by co-founders of his social media company, President Donald Trump's lawyers asked the court to recognize a form of temporary immunity from state civil litigation. The reasoning? A sitting president does not have time to deal with the distractions of civil lawsuits. Litigation, they argued, diverts attention from presidential duties. But around the same time, Trump filed multiple civil lawsuits of his own, defamation suits against media organizations, claims against a bank, and other actions seeking substantial damages. So the tension is straightforward. Too busy to be sued, but not too busy to sue. That's not just political drama. Structurally, it's an LSAT problem. So let's isolate the reasoning and break down the claim. There's an argument for immunity. The premise is civil litigation distracts from presidential duties. The presidency must be protected from such diversions. The conclusion is, therefore, a sitting president should receive temporary immunity from civil litigation as a defendant. Now add the complicating fact. The same president initiates multiple civil lawsuits during that same period. That creates an apparent inconsistency. If litigation is too burdensome to defend, why is it not too burdensome to prosecute? On the LSAT, this shows up as a credibility issue. An argument is weakened when the arguer's conduct appears incompatible with the principle they are asserting. This is classic behavioral inconsistency. Let's apply two specific LSAT tools. First, inconsistency. The immunity argument rests on the principle civil litigation burdens the presidency, but the conduct suggests a narrower reality. Unwanted litigation burdens the presidency. That's a shift, and the LSAT is hypersensitive to shifts like that. If the principle were truly litigation burdens the presidency, then initiating litigation would present the same problem. If it doesn't, then something else must be working in the argument. That leads to the second flaw, scope shift. Notice how the justification evolves. The immunity claim is institutional. The presidency must be protected from distraction. The defense of filing lawsuits, though, is actually personal. President Trump said the president has a constitutional right to seek redress for defamation. Those are different scopes. One concerns institutional executive function, the other concerns individual legal rights. On the LSAT, that's a red flag. When an argument moves from institutional protection to individual entitlement without explaining how the two interact, you may be looking at a scope shift. The question becomes, are we talking about protecting the office or preserving the personal rights of the office holder? If those are analytically distinct, the argument needs to reconcile them. If it doesn't, the reasoning is incomplete. For context, and sort of stepping outside of the LSAT for a moment, the Supreme Court previously held in 1997, during litigation involving Bill Clinton, that a sitting president is not immune from civil litigation for unofficial conduct. That precedent addressed defending a suit. It did not involve a president filing one. That distinction matters. The LSAT would ask, are we even comparing like with like? To strengthen the immunity argument, you would need to show something like, defending litigation consumes materially more time and attention than initiating it. Plaintiffs retain procedural control that minimizes executive burden, or defending litigation imposes unique constitutional harms that filing litigation does not. Without that clarification, the argument risks looking like special pleading, applying a principle in one direction but not the other. To weaken it, you simply highlight the asymmetry. If the president cannot tolerate litigation burdens, then voluntarily creating litigation seems inconsistent with that premise. This is the kind of reasoning the LSAT tests relentlessly. Does the principle apply symmetrically? Has the scope quietly shifted? Is the stated justification actually doing the work? To be clear, this episode isn't about politics, it's about structure. When someone argues this activity is too burdensome for the office and then engages in that same activity voluntarily, your LSAT training should immediately activate. Look for inconsistency, look for scope shifts, ask whether the principle is being applied evenly. The LSAT rewards precision. It punishes arguments that slide from institutional necessity to personal entitlement without explanation. And once you start spotting that move, you see it everywhere, not just in courtrooms, but in boardrooms, legislatures, and headlines. And thanks for listening to LSAT Logic Applied. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more short episodes where we apply clean logic to messy, real-world claims. See you next time.